Hi, I'm Michael Weatherly.
Hi, I'm Cote DePablo.
And this is Off Duty. We didn't do that, right? Okay, ready? You start this time.
Okay, hi, I'm Cote.
And I'm Michael.
And this is Off Duty.
See, it was as simple as that.
Welcome to Off Duty, an NCIS rewatch podcast. This week on the show, we're talking Season 3, Episode 23, Hiatus Part 1. Aboard a Turkish flag ship, an explosion occurs, killing one person and leaving Gibbs comatose with burns, abrasions, and a concussion. The team investigates. Eventually, Ducky welcomes Gibbs back, but Gibbs does not remember him.
Today, Cody, we are discussing Season 3, Episode 23, Hiatus, Part 1, written by Donald P. Bellisario, directed by Dennis Smith.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a Smith-Bellisario special. And if you think that Season 3 was jam-packed full of fun, I think this episode has the whole season inside it. I mean, it's intense, this episode.
It's intense, but it's also, you know what I like about this episode? It's that there's a lot of like really serious stuff. I mean, and everyone's trying to like keep it together for obvious reasons. You know, Gibbs is in a coma and Jenny Shepard is like showing her true colors as far as what her feelings may or may not be.
She looks great in her ball gown or whatever that thing is.
Oh my God. And she walks with that crazy red ball gown and, you know, that crazy pixie hair, and it's so good. And then she's got that ridiculous, infamous Polly Perrette monologue.
For Gibbs to be brought to a hospital in an ambulance cannot be good. I had to come see for myself in my hearse. Got a flat, as usual. So I got in a cab to go to the airport.
Gabby shoots her walking into the hospital and then holding on to that woman's hand going, "You're a good person."
And then Bert the farting hippo. Never, you know, we swing wildly.
What do you think, women don't fart? I love that line. What do you think, women don't fart? It's so good.
I mean, and Don also just lets things happen. I have an ad lib in this one, which I'm sure you spotted in MTAC, which we'll talk about later. I know what happened.
Look, she slapped me and I was just slapping her first.
If there's going to be any bitch slapping on this team, I'll do it. And I really said that out loud just to make Don Bellisario laugh. That's kind of what I do.
And they kept it.
And I just have to say, Season 3 started with a bang, right? I mean, Season 3 was your intro. Season 3 was Sasha Alexander.
Was Season of Change.
Yes, you had Sasha Alexander, Caitlin Todd, and her ghost memory, whatever you want to call it, sort of haunting everyone. And the rain that happened in those first episodes, the kill Ari 1 and 2. And then all of a sudden, here we are at the end, Hiatus Part 1 and Part 2. And it's bookended this season with two-parters that have a lot of real moody stuff happening.
And rain. And then there's like a really beautiful shot, and I'm not sure if you caught it. We're all there right after the explosion, and there's just this little window, you know, a tiny round window. And I look up and I go...
And you say, "It's raining."
It's raining. And it's so cryptic because everything's falling apart and Gibbs is away. And I'm like, it's raining. And there's like this, it's so bizarre. But
God bless everybody. I just think it's a highly entertaining episode of television. And I'm so happy we're going to be discussing it with our guest today. But before we get to that, can we flash back? At the time of this episode's release on May 9th, 2006, a disgruntled bus driver goes on a rampage in Dublin, Ireland, smashing through stopped and oncoming vehicles as he drives through streets, across tram lines, and up the wrong side of a divided highway. That's bananas.
That's absolutely bananas. And Warner Brothers records and releases, surprise, the 11th solo album by Paul Simon. The annual E3 video game convention is held in Los Angeles. A grizzly polar bear hybrid is found on the Banks Island in Canada.
Okay, what do you think a grizzly polar bear hybrid looks like? I think it looks like a little grizzly polar bear. All right, here's the episode synopsis, okay? While talking to an undercover agent on a suspicious foreign ship, a bomb explodes, killing the agent and resulting in Gibbs being left badly wounded and comatose while under. Gibbs remembers his first wife and daughter as well as their deaths. Meanwhile, Tony assumes temporary command of the team as they search for PinPin Pula, who is believed to be a member of a terrorist group. We are going to talk PinPin Pula. We are going to get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring him right in here. Executive producer extraordinaire. I'm going to say...
You'll say his name in English, and I'll say it in Codeish.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Horowitz.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marcos Horowitz.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, there he is, my friend, my friend.
And he's designed his shot very well.
I brought a friend just in case.
Oh, my God, look at you. You look the same, by the way. What do you do?
Well, you do, too.
What do you do? What do you take to look the same?
You're so kind.
Well, is it just the traveling that you've done since you've, entered a very well-deserved retirement stage of your life?
The retirement stage, of course, there's no stress.
Yes.
Here we have many, many things to discuss. But
all right.
the parameters of the show, obviously, is we're looking back. And you are here to discuss Hiatus Part 1 with us. Written by
Which
John
fortunately,
Bellisario.
I got a little birdie mentioned it last night, so I did sort of watch it again. So
well, I'm sure you
such a good
remember
episode?
it. You look back at these things. Now, at the time, of course, and we'll talk about some of the freight train out of control, lifestyle that everyone sort of led. But you look back at these shows 10, 20 years later, they're pretty damn good.
Oh, yeah.
And also they kind of come together magically.
So many layers and so much depth. And in the classic sense, you have this story about PinPin Pula or whatever the hell the guy's name is and the explosion.
PinPin Pula.
No one gives a damn about any of that stuff. That was the wonderful thing about NCIS is that it turned the whole procedural on its head, where it wasn't just really about figuring out the detective story. The detective story was just a means to an end. It was a means to get the characters involved with each other. That was the thing. That was the NCIS trick. And to watch the humans interact with each other. Here's a fascinating thing to try. Watch that episode. Just turn the volume off. And just look at the behavior and the expressions. Cody, what you can do without saying a word, with your body language, with your facial expressions. I would read these scripts sometimes and think, how are they going to act this? Like, how are they going to do this? There's nothing there. And you guys would find this way. And because the other part of it is you actually had real chemistry. There was real chemistry going on because you liked each other. And so that came across on the screen. And I think that has a lot to do with why people are so fond of both of you.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, Mark, and not to delve too deeply into any sort of conspiratorial waters, but you did JAG before the NCIS. And I think a show like JAG, as good as a show like an episode of JAG could be, it could never be recognized by the entertainment elite, the press, as even after 9/11, when they really did come around on the show a little bit. But
yes, they did.
But for some reason, like a CBS 1-hour drama is just like, well, let's stick that kid in right field. It's like the Entertainment Weekly or the press in general. They don't even know. They've never seen an episode. They just make a snap judgment that it's some right-wing jingoistic military show that's boring as watching, an IV drip in a hospital room with a 105-year-old staring at the infinity. It's like, that's what they think. Well, maybe that would be more interesting. But
that would be fascinating.
But you know what I'm saying? There's almost a contempt for Don Bellisario and his ilk of entertainment. But a show like MASH, which was a CBS show as well, albeit based on a Robert Altman movie, that did get in the 70s those accolades and did come out of a place. But at that time, Archie Bunker was on CBS. At that time, so you had, it was a different programming schema and everything. But by the time we got into the 90s and the aughts, if you were making a procedural drama about murder in the Navy and Marine Corps, you might as well have just been shooting a blank wall as far as critics were concerned. But I would say this in closing. This is my rant. Hiatus, part 1 and 2, Kill Ari, part 1 and part 2. They bookend season 3.
Yep.
And they are 4 fantastic episodes of television. And I challenge people to show me an episode of 24 or Grey's Anatomy or anything else that beats those
still
episodes.
holds up this many years later. It was a very entertaining show.
You know what I like about these shows, and it's funny because Mark, you brought this up. This really, of course, you're dealing with this attack and this explosion and all of that, but really what you have are these snippets of character moments, which are revealing character moments, which are, by the way, probably moments that are not happening in front of your peers. So they're private moments that allow the fans to just take a closer peek at who these people truly are. And they're sort of revealing themselves. And that's what Don really did so well. That's where his master storytelling really came in. And we've obviously, we all went through many years of NCIS, and we all went through, many people at the helm, but I have to say, I truly enjoyed that season for my own selfish reasons. It was my first, and I was like, oh, every show's like this.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about you the other day, and I thought, Cote de Pablo lands at the beginning of the 3rd season of NCIS. This is a rock and roll show in terms of how it was done, scripts coming in at the last second. I mean, it was a freight train hurling down the tracks, and the rest of the cast had already had 2 seasons. They were kind of hardened already by, you couldn't throw them anymore. And I'm just wondering, I just love to hear about what you felt coming into this and how you immediately ingratiated yourself into this group and connect with everybody so quickly. It was very anticipated. People were very excited about having you there. And I thought a very unexpected outcome. I never really thought a relationship between you and Tony was in the cards. Like, that's not where I thought this was going to go. And it felt to me, one of the things that the writers were encouraged to do was to sort of forget about dogma and watch the actors and write to their strengths and watch what they were doing and see what was interesting and then start writing in those directions. And I thought that had a lot to do with your abilities as an ensemble group to connect in the way you did and to riff. And you guys were like, by the end of season 3, you were like the Beatles coming out of Hamburg after 10,000 hours in rock and roll. You guys were like finely tuned improvisational musicians. It was so much fun to just go down the set. And, I've read this scene a dozen times, and I'm sitting there, and you guys are finding these little moments and digging deeper and going in and riffing off each other. And, it was the surprise of like, oh, that's what this scene is about, that would come out of those rehearsals. And hell, it might not even happen until the 3rd take of the coverage, for crying out loud. I mean, it could happen at any point in time.
You touched on something really important, and I want to use this question to wind back the clock for you, Mark, because the vanity piece, okay, so when you're doing television, like when you watch, I won't name any shows or anything, but like, let's say you're wearing a hat, and you have to wear that hat walking up to the door on the exterior shot. And then we put the camera on the inside of the set, which is maybe 2 days later, and because you're now at the stages shooting an interior, and you still have the hat on, but you have to remove your hat when you enter the room.
Right.
Well, there are some actors that won't allow you to put the hat all the way on their head because they don't want to hurt their hair, right? And what Mark Harmon said to us when we were doing the Jags, he was wearing his hat, and he took off his hat, and he had like a line on his head. Never mind his haircut, which is a whole separate podcast, which I'll be doing on Spotify next year. It's called Mark Harmon's Haircut. But Mark had this, thing, and some of his hair was pressed against his head. And I think it was Carla Dean or somebody walked over and, being a responsible and professional part of the crew was like, talking to Suze, the script supervisor, should we, fix his hair and should we do the thing where he takes his hat? And Harmon just called it. He was like, this is how my hair looks. And that about that guy, but he set, and for me, what I learned was DiNozzo's vein, Weatherly can't be, right? So, and I think that we all had that. If Ziva looks beautiful, it's because Ziva made herself look beautiful for whatever reason she wanted to get dolled up. But Cody DePablo wasn't worrying about being like getting some sort of product endorsement line because at every crime scene she looked like she stepped out of a magazine. And I think that level of authenticity, and it's still a compressed time frame, kind of ridiculous premise for a show. And that leads me to the question for you. You were there for the inception. You were there when Don McGill, I believe, tell us the story of how NCIS started.
My recollection is that it was pitched to CBS as Law and Order in the Navy. That was if you remember those spinoffs, that's sort of how those shows went. There was a crime, and NCIS would be the cops, and they'd come in and they'd deal with the crime for the first half of the show. And then a new set of young, happening JAG attorneys would then take over and prosecute the case. That was actually the original pitch. And that's kind of how those two episodes kind of worked. And then, Don he had his finger on the pulse of this stuff. You got to totally give him all the credit for this. He's just watching this and realized, I think, what he really had in this cast, and thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I want all of them. I want these people all the time. I don't want to be mixing it up. And created this whole new show. And there was a great deal of emphasis to make NCIS not look like JAG, to make it a very separate show visually.
And so talk about that. Talk about, Billy Webb and Don's editing style, and talk a little bit about what that is.
Well, the Bourne Identity movies had come out. There were these fast cut, almost like rock video style shooting for drama, kind of interesting. Man on Fire, those films were sort of coming out. And JAG was done almost like a 1940s movie. It was very classic shots and composition and big orchestra music and, kind of like an old 40s style film. And the idea was for NCIS to be different and for it to attract perhaps a younger viewer and just to have a different look and feel. So, you had something else to go watch. And so, part of the challenge was that these scripts came in at 72 pages long. A normal script would have been 10 pages shorter than that. 72-page scripts. I can remember Don directing at Yankee White, and you guys would do a rehearsal, and he'd say, okay, that's very good. Now do it twice as fast. Because you still had he wanted all the material. He didn't want to have to cut anything if he didn't have to. He just wanted it. So he would have you guys talk as fast as you possibly could. And we would shoot with 3 cameras all the time. I don't think you guys half the time even knew, okay, this is the close-up camera and this is shooting wide and this one's carrying me back and forth. You just had to be on all the time. There was no, well, I'll wait till I get to my close-up to give it,
no. Don't do that. We would have to tell guest stars, guest actors coming in, they'd say, oh, wait, what's that camera doing? I'm like, well, that could be your coverage. So I would just play it for all the marbles. I had done 13 years. I'd been working as an actor when I landed on the show, and I'd done, 500 episodes of a soap and a whole lot of half-hour sitcoms. One of my first jobs was the Cosby Show, and so you learn that every set is a different environment, and even 2 military dramas. NCIS Hawaii is not NCIS New Orleans, is not NCIS LA, is not NCIS. And every show is its own alchemy. It's its own blend of things. But what I am so grateful for, and you have such a special knowledge of, is Don was ready to punk Jag and to punk himself. And, one of the things he said to me early on was, Cote, gee, what are you doing? You're like a department store mannequin. He's got his cigar and he's like, God, you're just boring the shit out of me. Jesus. So he's like, he took me for a walk and he said, where's the guy I hired? Where's the guy I had dinner with? That entertained me. You know how much television I've watched? I'm bored. Don't just tell me a story. I don't want it. I don't want that. And I think he was at a point in his life where he was like, surprise me, anybody, somebody, offer me something new. When a writer came in to pitch a story, he would look at them and say, I've heard that story 10,000 times. Tell me a story I haven't heard. And, when Julie, his daughter, would be in the editing room and they were cutting conventional cutting. And he was like, go over to that camera. It's like, oh no, Don, that's on the other side of the line. He goes, I know where the line is. Don't tell me where the axis is. Right. But what he wanted us to fracture it and break it up. And I'm so glad I met him at that time because I needed to fracture and break up where I was coming from as an actor. I think maybe Harmon felt the same way about expectations of him. So I think part of that alchemy is everybody being ready for that moment of, you know what? Like, never mind the bollocks. It's like, we're going to put out a Sex Pistols album. Now, granted, it's on CBS at 8:00 on Tuesday, but it is going to be filled with more energy than you expect. It's going to be shot in a weird way. And people are going to do wildly inappropriate things all the time.
All the time. And hopefully unexpected things. That was the best part. When something would happen on the set that people weren't really expecting to happen. Oh, that was the best part of the day.
Talk about a guest actor being hired and a location being booked because you only had the first act to work with. And
so that was the norm. We had, we would be lucky if we had act 1 or act 2 on the first day or the day before filming, let alone the whole script. We never knew most of the time who the bad guy was. We wouldn't know that until about the 3rd or 4th day of shooting.
But that would probably make for casting really, really interesting because you weren't like looking for the bad guy. You were just looking for the guy that could play the part.
You just made my point. We had to overcast everyone because you'd get to act 4 finally about 4 or 5 days into filming of an 8-day show. And you get to the end, go, oh my God, the murderer is the secretary who had 1 line of dialogue in the first act. And now she's got a monologue this big. You had to make sure everybody was really strong because you just didn't know.
And sometimes somebody would be hired based on the strength of the first act. And so they're like, oh, I'm playing the SecNav, or, oh, I'm playing, whatever it is. I'm Condoleezza Rice or whatever. And then in act 2, then Don got bored with that character. So by act 2, the character is moved to the back of the room and has no lines. And then act 3 comes out and they're not even in it. And then in act 4, it turns out that they just have 1 line. And they're a serious actor, and they're like, what did I do? And it's like, it's not you. Well, maybe it's not you, but Don watches the dailies, right? And then he starts writing from the dailies. And I just have to say, I think that I feel so much gratitude that not only was Don ready to blow up the conventional procedural drama in the way that he wanted to, and nobody at CBS understood what the hell he was doing. The first poster, crime is their battlefield. Right. As if we were a bunch of earnest, criminal investigators. It's like, no, we're a clown car with guns. It's the craziest thing you ever saw. Well,
and you're speaking about it did not get the critical acclaim that other shows sort of got, but it's certainly the audience got it.
Yeah.
And you certainly had this incredibly dedicated audience group that just kept growing and growing. And it's not that I made a habit of reading a lot of fan mail, but I was always impressed with how far down the road they were way ahead of the writers in terms of where they thought things were going. That was always very, very interesting.
Was
And
it surprising to you that the show became so popular? And
Oh, my God.
What do you think made it so popular? Do you think?
Oh, no, I thought we'll be at it, 3 years.
Well, I remember
look for
signing a
something.
contract and my manager at the time saying, this will not go more than 3 years. And I was like, 3 years? That's an eternity.
See, and
What?
really, this was also part of Don's thing. Listen, he held the bar very high, and he expected a very high standard, and he could be a bit of a taskmaster. But he had a very long-term view. And one of the things that he was constantly telling the writers was, don't give it all away in the first season. Like, spread out the little bits, all the little origin bits. Just tease them a little bit, including your relationship, which will just very slowly start to, now pull them up.
I'm in MTAC, and I remember that Don was grumpy this day, and he was visiting set, and Dennis was scallywagging around and being hilarious Dennis. But also, when Don came on set, everyone, you batten down the hatches and everyone. But I knew that was the one thing Don didn't want me to do. As court jester, my job was to not bow down and not do that stuff. He wanted that little punkish element. So we're doing this MTAC scene, and I'm talking about, Galib and PinPin Pula and all this investigative thing. And they go, well, do you think this guy has a chance of, getting into Sea Fleet or whatever to investigate that? And I'm like, I got a better chance of going out with Jessica Alba than this guy does of getting into Sea Fleet.
Was that your line?
No,
I just made it. I made it up. I made it up
fantastic.
to make Don laugh.
Right.
And I swear I could hear I'm reacting to him laughing off camera. And that was kind of my job at that point and I'm so grateful for it because it taught me a kind of superpower I didn't know I had, which was not giving a shit. And, when Mark Harmon slapped me on the back of the head for the first time, I could have turned around and go, hey,
don't do that anymore. Yeah, right.
But instead I said, thank you, boss. Because I knew I deserved it. And, it's like we were and again, it's of a time. I think that the show has a certain kind of incorrectness in our current political climate. I think that even at the time, it was a little edgy. But we were in Santa Clarita and nobody could get to us. Now, that was another thing.
We were allowed to follow the impulse. We were allowed to play. The rules of the, sandbox rules were very different back then. And we were allowed to do things that today I think, even not very long ago, a couple of years ago, I was taking a class and I had a friend that I was doing a scene with, and he said, very politely and very respectfully, he said, I will now put my hand on you, and is it okay if I touch you here? And I looked at him and I was like, what are you doing? Like, just go, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, no, you need to follow the impulse, and he was like, no, I need to ask for permission, and I think back, of course, I'm older, and of course I came from a different education as far as, the improvisation of things and hey, let's allow ourselves to explore. And of course, many things have happened, throughout the years that have been a violation of those moments. But where we were working and how we were working at the time really enabled us to come up with a lot of what the things that certainly worked on the show that came out of either mistakes or kind of audacious impulses that were somehow received well by the other right. actors or characters, and we were playing, and it was embraced, and it was allowed, and it was okay.
But don't you think, Mark and Cote, that, like, for instance, the graphic nature of Autopsy and the way Ducky behaved around the cadavers?
We're having a little trouble with the help. Nothing for you to worry about. It's going to take more time than usual, but we're going to get you out of there. I promise.
That was not a norm. That wasn't normative. That wasn't the way Quincy, did it back in the 70s. It was, there was always a kind of sense of the way to play death is with nonchalance and a kind of, offset it. And that's that impulse.
Well, and also that level of like respect, obviously, for
for the dead.
And yes, and the thing with McCallum is that he really created a character that was so his own. He would talk to these dead bodies, and then he would do things that were out there and that were at times even irreverent, and but it was all in. It was all so much part of that character, and that was also him. He was so in love with the craft too. Now looking back at it, and how much respect he had for it, and how much he loved his character and the research he would do. And I mean, it's so admirable. And now, so many years later, and certainly after his passing, you kind of go, wow, it was so cool to be in that company, and so cool to watch somebody that cared and had been in the business for so long. I mean, we worked with a legend,
Every one of you, and this is true with the current cast as well, but every one of you cared. Every one of you showed up to work in the morning, stepped up to the plate, and swung that bat as hard as you could every day. And that energy was infectious. And you could feel it. And the audience could feel it. And you
had to, though, Mark.
You had to, yeah.
And it's
more of a choice.
But you didn't have to because somebody was like there, like going like, get over, you had none of that. And it's the thing that I always say to young people, especially now as I get older, like, oh, how did you get started? And I always say the same thing. Try to find a group of people that you admire and you look up to, because they'll keep you on your toes. So when you show up to a set and you see that everyone's like, okay, these guys are good, like you have to really try so hard. And if you're lucky, you bring something to the table that also sets, and so you keep bringing that bar higher and higher and higher. It's the reason why I think so many actors, want to work with the best of the best, because at that point, it's not like, oh, you're just in their company. You have to step up to the plate. You have to get better. You will get better. Even if you're just watching. You're just watching. You're in the presence of greatness.
Do you remember the read-through, which was the backdoor pilot for NCIS Los Angeles? I hope you have a memory of that.
Yes, and we actually had Daniela.
We actually talked to
that.
Daniela.
We had Daniela was there, and Chris was there, and Todd, and they were all there. And I would say, and like I said, you were all battle hardened by that point in time. You were an amazing band that just rocked. And also, I would say, perhaps a tad competitive. And so everyone gathered around the table. And this didn't start until about the fourth season, I think, these table reads at lunch. But they really became quite important. And this was for the first episode of the NCIS Ellie spinoff. And like I said, Ella was there and Chris was there. And normally in a table read, it's fairly casual. You're not really supposed to be acting so much. People are just kind of exploring the text and kind of finding stuff. But you guys, we could have shot it and put it on the air. It was, you guys just knew exactly what was going to happen. And I'm watching the expressions on LL and Chris's face as this is going on. And they're holding on to the table, just trying to sort of keep up. And I remember, and they were very humble about this, even at the end of it, they were like, holy cow, you guys are really good. Like they couldn't get over it. And that really speaks to, how tight you were as a group. I always feel the underlining theme of NCIS, its success, and the thing that I think the audience really responded to was that the story really was about the kids trying to please dad. That was the story. Like I said,
it still is, isn't it?
Well, exactly. The kids trying to please dad. Will Gibbs be proud of me if I achieve this goal? Or will he be angry with me if I fail? And then what are my brothers and sisters going to think, when he admonishes me? And of course, everybody's been in, that position before. So there's a certain amount of, commiseration that goes on. And then that was what was going on in the stories in front of the camera. But I would say, especially in the first 3 seasons, that same dynamic was going on behind the camera. And Dad, in that case, was Don Bellisario. Everyone, not just the actors, but all the producers and the writers, everyone wanted to please, Don.
Do you remember the casting process of the pilot of NCIS whose names you heard first, and what was that story like?
I don't know. I just remember coming down the set at the beginning of that third season and seeing all of you. There was some scene where you were all together in one place, and I thought, oh my God, it really is a television show. Like this, look at everyone has their place. Everyone is clearly defined. How many shows do you watch now where one and two are kind of standouts, and then everybody else you can barely remember who the hell they are and what the hell they do? And that was not the case in our show. Everybody, Polly Perrette, everybody brought something. Sean Murray, my God.
When you talk about a show's success and that alchemical mixture, I think it is relatability and identifiability. Like you said, there's a father and everyone sees that family dynamic, but even the interpersonal, like the sibling dynamics, and sometimes it even feels like a workplace comedy. Like we could be working at Allstate selling insurance with guns,
Yeah.
We're insurance investigators. We have to go to some crime scene.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
And we're like, well, it looks like arson to me. I don't know. Let's get the duck man in here and figure it out. But there was I think that if you worked in an insurance firm or you worked at a rental car agency and you had cubicles like the cubicles we had, it didn't feel like some futuristic, super fancy, no one's ever seen a set like this before. It was like, oh yeah, it's the big orange room. It's like, this is a place that is where people who are perfunctory do their widget work. And that means if I work that way, I can watch this show and it's relatable and identifiable, but it's also, who are these people? I wish I worked with these people.
That's right.
And when I went down with Rick to Pendleton to the NCIS offices, Harmon and I went down for the Ice Queen meltdown for the Jags. And Rick Warmack was the NCIS advisor before Leon Carroll for the original pilot. And Warmack took me down there in his car, and I'd never really rode with a federal agent before like that. And we went in there and we met all the agents, and I was there for hours, and we heard stories. And there was this one guy whose jeans were a little too tight and his shirt was unbuttoned one button too many. And he really liked his hair. He kind of kept doing this with his hair. And
you were like, that's me. You were like that.
And he had lots of stories. And I was over by his desk. And then he was talking about how he was going to go skydiving that weekend. And he just bought a new GTO. And then he walked away. And I turned to look at the woman who was sitting at the desk, which I remember being on a slightly higher level. And I turned and I said, he's a piece of work. And she goes, he doesn't mean any of it. He's just, he's harmless, but oh my God. And I was like, oh my God. That's
but you
so
wso
good.
He's a really good agent.
Yeah, he's a really good agent.
But like people tolerated his vanity. They tolerated his John Travolta tight pants and his kind of over eager sensibility because he doesn't mean it.
And this was brought up constantly. You were also really good agents. So you could have these quirky, personalities and these interactions with each other that seemed perhaps a little too familiar for the workplace, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, you're the guys that got the call to go in and get the bad guys. And you were really good at it.
That's why I think it became kind of like a family show. It was G-rated. It had a lot of funny bits. A lot of people could say like, oh, Dad, I want to be like that. Or, hey, Dad, you remind me of that. There was that kind of like family element where you had these kind of cartoonish at times characters, but everyone had this persona that they could identify or certainly parts of a persona that they could identify or maybe want to be more like.
And entertaining as hell. You know what I mean? Just very entertaining to watch. Great energy.
Very.
It just reminded me that there are people that probably joined NCIS because they were inspired 20 years ago, and now they're retiring.
That's right. Oh, my God. I mean, the longevity. Can you just think about the impact? I mean, how many times did you run in to talk to agents? In the beginning, I have to say, they were very good with us. They gave us a lot of support in the very beginning and then really just kind of sat back. And obviously, I went to the NCIS place in D.C. years ago, and they have a wall of photographs of fallen NCIS agents. And so I asked the gentleman, I said, well, how did this gentleman pass away? He said, oh, car accident. Oh, how about this person over here? Car accident. They'd never actually shot a gun. They'd never actually killed anyone. But
right.
They weren't going to put the kibosh on any of that on our show. They really allowed, that because they were getting so much attention internationally. They're very, very good at staying connected with their international partners all over the world. And because the show ended up having this huge international appeal, they became famous. I mean, to go from the early episodes where you used to have to explain to the TSA guy, no, not CSI, NCI, to now everyone remembering NCIS.
The name of this game is Producer's Dilemma. And we're going to set out some scenarios for you here. And as the pro producer that you are, we're going to ask you, what would you do? Not what would Gibbs do, which we know is also a thing. Okay, your number one on the call sheet has gastroenterological problems and is flatulating constantly, incessantly on set. And co-stars and guest stars are complaining. It's consistent. Even the sound department has now come to you and said some of it has to get looped because your number one is farting on his lines. What do you do?
Farting is nothing. That is nothing. Are you kidding? Farting?
Okay, all right, here we go.
We've had people in comas that we had to roll out and shoot. Just keep shooting. Keep shooting. We'll loop it later. Don't worry about it.
Okay, Rachel Good has come up with a new ridiculous team uniform for your main cast to freshen up the show's look after so many seasons on the air. But it's a disaster, and you don't want to hurt her feelings. What do you do?
Rachel, we have a new series that is in the works, and this is going to be perfect for that. We're going to save it.
We're going to save it.
For an episode that's coming up where we have a whole different team show up, we're going to put them all in that. It'll be fantastic.
By the way, not just because Rachel Good is one of my dearest friends, but I don't think she could ever come up with a bad outfit.
She's
That's true.
Extremely talented.
I know.
Yes.
We're going to have
One of the best.
Oh my God. As quite frankly, all of the department heads on that show.
Yeah,
That was part of the pleasure.
Okay.
It's almost an impossible situation, but we'd like to know what you would have done.
Here we go.
Event that would have
A
happened.
prominent guest star is a very prominent, well-known actress guest star, has signed on to play a very big part in the show. Lots of negotiations. It took a lot of study. You're paying her more than you've ever paid any guest star, but it was all contingent that she know how to ride a motorcycle. When she arrives on set, she does not know how to ride a motorcycle.
These are not so far-fetched, my friend. These are not, I don't have to sort of imagine too much what these are.
So Jamie Lee Curtis can't ride a motorcycle, but she said she could. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't Jamie.
That was not Jamie Lee. Jamie Lee's, she's a player.
She could ride a motorcycle.
We would, out of an abundance of caution and safety, obviously someone who doesn't know to ride a motorcycle can't be put on one to do much. So unfortunately, she'd have a helmet. So we would have her we would push her into shot for, when she arrives and take off the helmet. And then we would hire a stunt person to do the rest of it.
That's professional show business, everybody out there in the interwebs. Okay, here's your last one. So far, you're 4 for 4. Let's see if you can go 5 for 5. And your prize is a monogrammed hand towel from the off-duty closet. You show up to your location to find that it's a real live active crime scene. Your big-time celebrity guest star is a method actor and has already convinced the police on the scene to let you shoot on the scene of the actual crime. He's threatening to walk if you don't let him. The police seem to be willing to make it happen. What do you do?
Well, if the police are going to play along, I'm not going to argue with them. I'd say, let's go.
Let's
Like, as
contaminate
long
that
as you
evidence.
give me my shot.
Just shoot. That's all. We don't want to. We never want to stop. That's the. You can't stop the train. You have
Okay.
I
to
love it.
somehow finesse it. It's sort of like flowing water. It's like a river. You can't stop the river, but you can kind of, you can make it curve this way and that way. That's what you're going to do.
Okay.
Shoot. When you came back for your special episode,
You mean
in
season 2019?
19, yeah.
Hello, Gibbs. No time for pleasantries. You're in danger.
And we were all waiting for you, and we were very good at keeping secrets. These surprises that happened in front of the audience were a surprise to many, many people who worked on the show that were not told about what we were going to do. There was a whole thing we did where that scene was never published. It only existed on one piece of paper, and we would literally show it to the dozen people that had to be involved, and that was it. It was never released to agents or anyone. The dailies were all kept separate. Everything was separate. This happened when Kate was shot on the rooftop. That's where it started. And we came up with what I called Fight Club rules. We're invoking Fight Club rules. We're just not going to talk about it. And I mean, you're not going to talk to your wife, your husband, your kids, your friends at the bar. Nobody. And we were able to sort of pull this off. And your return was one of those where we sent the whole crew off except for a very small group of people.
Skeleton crew.
You got caught up in traffic or something. There was some kind of accident or something. So we were waiting. It was late. It was the last night of the last day of the season. And I forbid anyone to take any pictures, but I was there with my camera. And there's this moment where suddenly a hush came over the stage, and echoing from the distance are footsteps, very distinct boots.
Clomp, clomp, clomp.
Coming closer and closer
The
and closer.
boots.
And everyone turned and looked and waited. And then from around this corner comes Cote de Pablo. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment.
Was a really crazy moment for me too, because I remember thinking like, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel, And I thought, well, it's going to be what it's going to be. But I remember like, am I going to be able to step on stage? And am I going to be able to like say these lines? I haven't done this in so long. And it was all just kind of there, and it was kind of magical. I remember seeing you. You were really, I have to say, Horowitz, you've always been just such a sweet, present, understanding, artistic, sensitive, total consummate pro. I mean, I have no idea how you did it half the time, because it always seemed to me like you were just kind of like greeting people with this very warm smile. You never came across as, anyone who was like just angry, or like, the typical sort of quintessential producer that's always like running around being loud. And, you always had this really kind of great energy about, and the world could be falling. And I knew that I could like look at you and you would do this to me, and I loved you for it. You would come close to me and you would blink your eyes and you would go ding, 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 ding. And then you would look at me and then you would go, dear heart. You remember? You would always call me dear heart. And I always knew that like, some really horrible things could be going on, certainly personally. And I could just find you from wherever. And you would just kind of give me that little Horowitz love, blinking of the eyes. And then, hi, dear heart. And I was like, okay, everything, I'll be okay. You're just so sweet. Thank you so much.
Just think about this. This many years later, here you are back together. People still care enough to tune in and listen to this. And looking forward, are we talking about this?
Yes, of course. We've been talking about it now.
To more. And you guys are going to bring it. And you're going to make so many people so happy. It's going to be fantastic.
We've been talking about it for a long time. Michael and I, we always said, oh God, if we could tell the story in our, in our way, or certainly have the great privilege of maybe having some input, in storylines, or, wouldn't that be fun? So get a chance to do it. as you know, nothing's a guarantee, and we're just excited to be able to do it, and have this adventure somewhere in Europe and explore these characters from an emotional place and see what they're doing and how they're going to tackle all of it.
I think it's going to be great, and people are they're really going to enjoy it. You're going to have a great time. Good for you.
I am so glad that we got to do this. I feel like this should be a two-parter.
Oh.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface of
You've made this
psychology.
very easy for me. Thank you.
Mark, thank you, dear heart.
Oh, you're very good.
Doing, 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 doing.
This was particularly fun, I have to say.
But every one of these things is different.
They all have their own little special sauce, don't they?
They're like puppies. You just you get a new one. You're like, I think this one's my favorite. Then you pick up another one. You're like, but this one. I mean, when do you get bored of puppies? Doesn't happen. I feel like we had some real insight, and I know that we have been trying so hard to orchestrate a conversation with Mr. Bellisario, because having Don would just be so great. And
But isn't it remarkable how much we've actually talked about Don without talking to Don? Like, we talked a lot about Don today with Mark, and so I feel like no matter what, we've talked about his work, we've talked about, we've celebrated his work, and I certainly feel like I've said, how thankful I am to have, had a taste of that world, the Don world.
Yeah. It's been really extraordinary. I'm very, very happy that we got to talk to Mark Horowitz today.
Yeah.
Now, we've got some fan questions. Harriet from Kentucky. I love how Tony looks after the team with Gibbs in the hospital, and he does an amazing job being leader. Why, thank you, Harriet from Kentucky. Who do you think would be the worst temporary leader out of the crew? I think it was Donoso.
No, actually, I think you. No, I think. You know what I think? You know who I think would not she would just be so all heart the whole time. It would be Abby Shuto.
Oh, yeah.
It would just be but
and
if you don't want to,
really
you don't have to do
well
it.
with others.
Oh.
She doesn't really want anyone else in her space, and she has a lot of fear. There's some phobias.
Yeah, I think there would be an avoidance of a lot of the important things that need to be tackled.
I think Ziva would be great, but you've got a lone wolf streak that might make you a little tricky. I don't know how much of a team player she is. Hey, Jules from North Dakota said, who came up with the name PinPin Pula?
Oh, God, Jules,
that is one for the books. I bet you it was Don.
That is one question we've been asking for, I think, 20 years.
It's got to be Don Bellisario.
Don Bellisario, for sure. PinPin.
PinPin Pula. I mean, I had a picture of PinPin Pula next to my desk for years after that episode aired. Do you remember it?
Well,
it was the actual actor playing it, but it didn't say PinPin Pula. It was just a picture of the actor who played PinPin Pula. And I had a little pinup of PinPin in my squad room on the wall. It's probably in the background of some shots.
The name would just be thrown in the middle of a scene, I think years to come. And it would just be like a laughing moment.
PinPin Pula.
PinPin Pula.
No, it's right up there with some of the best. All right. We're going to Sam in Utah. Director Shepard calling Condoleezza Rice to get into the trauma ward of a random hospital was pretty funny. Who on your contact list would you guys call if you needed to impress somebody?
Oh,
or
so that
get
means
into
that you need to name drop. I have no one.
I would call Cody DePablo. And
by the way, you did.
But no, we're not telling that story for legal reasons.
Okay.
We're not telling that story.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, you did.
But I have in the past, we can just say, generally speaking, I have in the past.
And I was like, what are you doing, Weatherly? Anyway, I love you for doing so. And by the way, I picked up the phone because I was like, oh, that's my friend Weatherly. I haven't heard from him forever. And I did. And I was just amazed at the reason. Anyhow.
When they say call a friend on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they're like, call a friend. You're my call a friend. That's if I were on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they were
but hey. This episode really goes into something that you and I have talked about before. Actually, it's more like a life thing, and I'm not sure if we have time to go into this. But this episode really goes into trauma. And the character of Gibbs goes, he's in a coma, and the doctors keep saying, we feel that he doesn't want to wake up because he's revisiting some sort of trauma. So this is a personal question. You may opt out. It may be edited, whatever. Have you ever felt like you didn't want to wake up from something because you hit a trigger, or you revisited a trauma, or you went to a place that was dark and you felt like, oh, okay, I need time to process this?
What do you mean wake up?
Now, I don't mean, by the way, that you're like in a coma or that you want to do something to yourself or you just don't want to wake up. I just mean, have you gone through revisiting trauma?
I have. Since my brother passed away, I have been able to look at aspects of growing up from a kind of different angle. It's almost like somebody moved the camera and I'm kind of seeing memories differently. And that's really interesting. I'm starting to understand my anecdotal nature, the defense mechanism where I turn everything into a funny story because it makes me uncomfortable, is also something my mind does with painful, traumatic stuff from the past. So my interior defense mechanism turns it into funny for me, or an anecdote, or a thing I learned from, or, as opposed to being comfortable in the discomfort of that memory and letting me see it from a more honest place.
I very recently went through a little bit of, I would wake up in the middle of the night and it wasn't revisiting trauma. It was completely the opposite. So recently I had a death in the family, and that was my grandfather, and he passed at 98. And I didn't get a chance to be there. But I did go there a couple of months before, and I said my goodbyes. And at one point I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would start thinking about my grandparents. And I realized how lucky I was, because I had those two incredible human beings and they loved me so much. And I thought to myself, I don't think they'll ever know how much I loved them, and I don't think they'll ever know how important they were for me, and how much they shaped me in my life, especially as a young child. And then I thought, no, there is a way they know. And so I started having this dialogue with them, waking up in the middle of the night for months. And then I would just say, oh my God, I love you so much. And oh my God, thank you so much. And oh my God, how privileged was I to have that kind of unconditional love and that guidance and that like eternal support and, all of that. So it wasn't quite trauma. I was dealing with this nostalgia of missing them so utterly and completely. And they had gone, and there was a part of me, I think what I'm trying to say is I've been talking to the child in me that still needs a couple of things. And I find out that they were such a big part of my life. And the child was they were such a big light in that child's life. And today, sometimes when I'm looking for that light and I can't find it, and especially as I get older, I go, oh my God, how much would I give to just be in their company now, because they were just so special. But the greatest part that has come through this kind of awareness of revisiting beautiful memories, and having the awareness that they're no longer here, is the fact that there's also this really kind of beautiful thing about connecting with the idea of, okay, well, they're physically not here, but they're completely here. And I could still make peace with that. And I could still say thank you. And I could still say how much I love them. And I could still say, like, wow, wasn't that such a beautiful thing to have felt that, to have had that in this lifetime, and to have been so lucky.
A lot of gratitude there, Miss DePablo. When we talk about Gibbs trauma in this episode, Hiatus, right? And as that moves forward into Hiatus Part 2 and everything, Gibbs is a keeper of secrets.
But aren't we all?
We are, but I think that part of what you're talking about is, it's good to tell the people that you love them. Let them know.
Oh, I think it's so important.
And
even if, and
nothing
even
to
if
be
it's
ashamed
like
of.
No. In fact, you just don't know how long you'll be here. And as you get older, that becomes like an ever-present reality.
So Gibbs' rule of the day is rule number 4. The best way to keep a secret, keep it to yourself. The second best, tell one other person. There is no third best. I don't really think Gibbs shares a lot of those secrets, though.
Let me ask you something. Do you have secrets?
Yes.
And do you share them with anyone? Have you ever shared them with one person, or are there some secrets that you haven't even shared with someone, like with a special someone? Or do you have at least one person that you've shared secrets with? Or do you still take some with you that you don't share?
Yes. I have one person that I do talk to in absolute, and not a professional, not a therapist person, but like a friend. I'm a very open book, but there are a couple of things that I probably,
Weatherly, for as open as you are, you have secrets.
I've got secrets. Now, don't forget that you can watch all of these with us on Paramount Plus, and that you can catch new episodes of NCIS on CBS. And you can probably just sit down and start channel surfing and you'll find it pretty much anywhere in the world. Or you can go bring out the DVDs. I don't care how you watch it.
Just watch it.
Just watch it. It's fun. Especially this season. What a great season of television.
It's a super fun season.
Next week on Off Duty, as Gibbs struggles to cope with the effects of awakening from his coma, which has left him with amnesia, Tony and the rest of the NCIS team attempt to find the terrorist PinPin Pula, which, incidentally, was Cody's original stage name back in New York. Anyway, the team races... Anyway, the team races to stop a potentially devastating attack from occurring, and this is it, folks. The grand finale of Season 3, Episode 24, Hiatus Part 2. Oof. Foof. Foof. I'm Michael Weatherly.
Hi, I'm Cote Pablo.
And this is
Off Duty.
Welcome to Off Duty, an NCIS rewatch podcast. Today on the show, it's the season finale of Season 3, Episode 24, Hiatus, Part 2. Gibbs regains consciousness, but he's lost all memory since 1991. Then he starts to remember a few things. Jen, an old buddy, and then he remembers Siva. Today's episode, Season 3, Episode 24, Hiatus, Part 2. This is it. This is the season finale of Season 3. The bookend, it started with Kill Harry Part 1, Part 2. It ends with Hiatus Part 1, Part 2. I think it's, if not the best season, it's top 3.
Yeah, I really like the season very much. It was very special to me for obvious reasons. It was my first season, and I had so much fun.
It's the season finale. It's the season finale of Off Duty as well.
Oh my gosh, yes it is. So at this time of this episode's release, May 16th, 2006, Finnish monster rock band Lordi won the Eurovision Song Contest with the song Hard Rock Hallelujah, the first heavy metal song to ever win Eurovision. Do you know anything about Eurovision, Shelley?
I do know about Eurovision.
You do?
I do, yes, because my wife is from Eastern Europe.
Oh, okay. I didn't know much about this. Heavy metal song to win. Oh, wow. New Super Mario Brothers was released in North America for the Nintendo DS, eventually becoming one of the top 25 best-selling video games of all time. Did you ever play that game? Did you ever play the Mario Brothers Nintendo thing?
No.
You never did?
I was trying to get work as an actor.
Got it.
I stopped playing video games in like 1983.
Lucky you. Some people always just get stuck. I think I did the Mario Brothers thing for a little bit, and I think I played, if I'm not mistaken, on set Tetris for just a little.
Oh, Tetris, yes.
Remember
so that
Tetris?
Was like a Game Boy kind of thing.
And also, I think when it came out, and I was very, very young, like the beginning of the beginning, Pac-Man.
Sure, don't give away your age.
Oh,
a tattooed mummy of a woman in her late 20s of the Mochi tribe from 1,500 years ago was found in Peru. A tattooed mummy.
Well, I mean, tattoos have been around for, my gosh, forever.
I don't have any tattoos.
Not one?
Not a one.
Is it because you were just raised very conservative, or what's the deal?
I got a couple reasons. I'll give you reason number one. I don't like needles. I don't like needles at all. I could never have been a heroin addict, and if I was, I would have been smoking it or snorting it because I was not going to be putting it into a vein. I do not like needles. So that almost stops me right there. Number two, weirdly, I am a little bit of a germaphobe about things. So like blood and ink, and that's not really I'm into that either. And then, and I'm working up to it. I also really like to change like my weight or my hair or I like to change who I am and how I look. I get stronger, or I get skinnier, or I get chubby and fat, and I like to play with all of those things in an impermanent way. And the idea of some permanent stamp on me flies in the face of things. And then lastly, I don't want to have to be in hair and makeup for 1 second longer than it takes.
Yes, but you didn't know this. Well, I didn't know that, for example.
I became an actor when I was 20, 21.
No, I get it. But for example, like the idea of tattoos wasn't really around until I was a little older. And by then I didn't know the whole makeup and hair thing. But I will say this. I do agree with you. And I remember going back to this a couple of times because I remember having this conversation with friends, and they were like, well, how come you don't have a tattoo and all that? And I just said, I guess like the idea of committing to something forever and ever and ever and not being able to change it, not being able to modify it, and not being able to do something, it's just maybe too much. And like what I like today, knowing what I have gone through and the things that I have liked, like, would I still like something that I like? Would I still wear the same shirt?
Johnny Depp had Winona Forever tattooed on his shoulder, and now it's Wino.
So let's get into today's episode and what an episode it is.
Let's get into this episode. Now, can you sum it up for me? Today's episode, season 3 finale, Hiatus Part 2?
No, but I think you can.
PinPin Pula, baby.
It's life or death, right?
Don't get upset, Jethro. You won't remember.
Give me a name.
PinPin Pula.
Gibbs wakes from his coma, but has amnesia. There's a story twist. The search for PinPin Pula continues, the most powerful adversary in NCIS history until, the next more powerful adversary. You know what? I don't think that PinPin Pula is the most powerful adversary. I think that it was your brother who killed Caitlin Todd.
No, I think that could be argued by a lot of people. I think there's been a lot of
I don't believe he's the most powerful adversary. I take issue with that. Mike Franks enters the scene. God, that guy, Muse Watson, so
oh my
fantastic.
God, he's so good. He's so good. He makes me so happy every single time he comes on.
Now, there's a very dramatic plot twist at the end of this episode, but we're not going to give it away.
No, we won't.
Because we're going to start with what this episode really is. And it, first of all, is written by Don Bellisario, directed by Dennis Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And Cody, what are the hallmarks of like a Bellisario Smith collaboration? What do you think those things kind of line up to be? I think you can find oneers because Dennis likes oneers.
He likes oneers. I was going to say there's a little bit of rain sometimes in the episodes.
Don likes rain.
And Don likes rain.
It's moody.
They're usually very good character episodes. They give a lot of insight on the character. There's a lot of insight into Gibbs, as he's going through this, loss of memory thing. He reverts to 15 years prior, right? And so he's reliving something that was an epic, tragic loss in his life. And there's a really, hard scene to watch.
I want my family. I want Shannon. I want Kelly.
When we shot this, it's been a while. I just kind of went oh my God, the insight into what the character is going through is a lot. Also, I love when he starts, when Jenny Shepard is there and there's that thing where he sees his wife and all of a sudden it's Jenny sort of lingering and he gets this flash memory of them making love. And then she goes really close to him and she goes,
were you thinking, did you remember us making love or something like that? And I was like, oh, forward. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's a really good moment.
Like the ending, everything's about to change. Because remember when we come back, the opening scene of season 4 is a coffee cup coming off the elevator as the doors open. And we think it's Gibbs because it's the jacket and the coffee cup and the thing. And then when it goes wide, it's me holding the coffee cup and I go sit at Gibbs' desk. And DiNozzo has just, been given the mantle because Gibbs is on a hiatus. But it all starts here with this episode and his, we talked about this a lot. Season 3 is about this sort of moral ambiguity and about a lot of fractured time narratives, a lot of flashbacks, a lot of dealing with the death of Kate, dealing with an introduction of new characters, you and the new director Shepard. Lots of transition. And I think it's so fascinating that it culminates in Gibbs and PinPin Pula blowing him up, but in Gibbs really feeling like, that's it, I'm done.
Well, it's funny, watching it this time around, I had this moment when I thought, oh, I know why he's quitting. Because in a way, he's revisiting something that maybe he's never dealt with.
That's right.
He's there in that bed and he's going back to this horrible, traumatizing emotional time. And then I think what happens to him is that I think he has a moment where he's like, I miss them terribly and I can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's at that moment that he goes, I need to go lick my wounds.
This episode is what, like you were saying, it brings everything up, all of that buried, repressed, unprocessed stuff.
But by the way, it's not just happening to Gibbs. When you start paying attention, there's a lot of other characters that are dealing with the same thing. They're dealing with loss and they're dealing with, getting in touch with that and doing the proper thing, which is to mourn.
Interesting. And I think that's what you were saying about Don Bellisario writing character. He always mirrors the sort of central theme in all of the different story strands. Yeah. Everything points back to the main thrust of the story. It is fascinating.
I like it, and I love the ending, and I love that he tells Ziva, I owe you one, and she says, I'll collect. Because it's just such a great line. Yep. I'll collect.
What do you think about DiNozzo's rule number 3?
Rule number 3, never underestimate your opponent.
No, actually, rule number 3.
DiNozzo's rule numero 3, probate.
Gotcha.
Never underestimate your opponent. I think he's right on.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good one.
Mike Franks. I remember walking with Muse Watson during this episode down the alleyway.
Yeah.
With Harmon and Muse. And I just remember thinking, this show, because the show was coming on, but it wasn't like a giant hit show yet. It was, we were doing better in season 3 and the ratings had been improving and everything. We were having
season
a lot of
4,
fun.
we hit number 1, right?
Season 4. That was the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. Season 4 around December.
But I just remember walking and I was like, Muse Watson is the real deal.
Hello, Proby.
My brother and I married the same woman twice.
But that mustache is not put on in the hair and makeup department.
No, and by the way, the coolest guy, such a terrific actor. He loved this character, and he brought so much, his wardrobe, but he brought so much to the show. Like the character of Mike Franks brought so much richness, so much depth, and it actually
real.
so real. But it made us view from a fan standpoint, made us view Gibbs as a probie, as a and so it gave us insight into that character, which is like the young version of him, like the youthful, like the before I became boss kind of thing. And Mark does something that is so good in that scene where he's eating the steak. There's this real, and he does it beautifully, and it's very subtle. There's this real sort of wide-eyed, like, I'm excited about this boss, moment.
Retired. Damn, this is good. I owe you. Had to be a hijacking, huh?
And it's just a beautiful thing that he does. And now with time and experience, man, I go like, there were some times that I'd be like, oh, what is Mark doing? But he's so good at being very subtle. He plays around with the dynamic of being boss and then being student. And it's so cool to watch. There's a definite change in demeanor. There's a definite change in energy. And he does it in a very subtle way. Let's talk about our next guest. It's Gary Cole, a man that, by the way, you and I have not actually truly had a conversation with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I shook his hand on the set.
But that's not the same thing.
But he is the number one. He is the number one. He
is the new number one on NCIS.
The leader of NCIS. And I didn't think anyone could take Mark Harmon's place. The Gibbs seemed irreplaceable to me. But you know what? It takes extraordinary talent. It takes a silver fox.
It takes a silver fox.
So should we roll out the red carpet and hit the drum roll for our guest?
For Mr. Gary Cole.
Name's Alden Parker, as in Agent Alden Parker, Federal Bureau of Investigation.
You run an Omni 4 on there?
Omni 5, game changer, potato.
Get your head out of the sand, okay? You screwed up.
Don't mean to step on any toes. Listen, Paul, can I call you Paul? Don't answer, I'm gonna do it anyway. Seems you have a history of coloring outside the lines. Zombie it is. The only question I have is, do you guys ever go to the bathroom? Do you want to die by lethal injection or spend the rest of your life rotting in a jail cell that smells like soup? Oh, that's creepy.
Are you sitting by any chance in a room with a lot of art that you painted, or are you just like an art aficionado?
No, I like to make it seem that way, but it's all my wife's art. This is her studio/office, so this is her domain.
Oh, I love it.
It looks impressive that I possibly did it, but I can barely do stick figures, so no, it's not.
So when did you guys wrap? You wrapped some time ago, probably in April, right?
Yeah, first week of April. April 4th, something like that, yeah.
Here's my question. You've done so much like television work and film work and everything, but television is, and of course Steppenwolf and theater and all the like extraordinary history, but television is this strange octopus that gets its tentacles into your life in a way that can be slightly uncomfortable for most normal people. So when you finish an like, what was it, 22 episodes this year or 24?
No, well, this year was, because of the strike, was very short.
Oh, that's right. You guys.
So
we just.
So it was 10 this year. Yeah.
Oh, that's not.
But
quite
the previous
as brutal.
No, but the previous years was it was 22. Both of them were 20.
So do you have a kind of decompression plan? Like when they bring people back from the International Space Station and their bone density has been reduced, so they have to actually put them in like a hyperbaric chamber for a while. Do you have some kind of simulated environment you retreat to?
No, I don't know. I mean, I early in my career, I did a show called Midnight Caller, which was on NBC. This was like, it started in the late 80s, maybe 88, 89. And I did it for 3 years. And I got a pretty good baptism, because it was one of those shows where I was basically in everything. I mean, I had some time, but I rarely had a day off or anything like that. So the environment I was, kind of used to, although after that series, I never had anything resembling that schedule until now, until I went back to NCIS. And even then it's, the way it's kind of formatted, it's, you'll get a day or two here and there. So I don't know. And because of the efficiency of where the show is right now, and how long it's been on the air, there are the days where, you look up and it's 3:00 and lo and behold, we're done. I mean, that's unheard of in a lot of places.
Wait 1 second. Can you say that again?
Well, I'm sure it wasn't the case 10 years ago. No.
Which is why we're going, wait 1 second.
I know.
Back it up.
Can I tell you a David McCallum story about this? And I don't know if you really got to, I'm sure you got to hang out with him on the crime scenes and in the autopsy. David could shaggy dog a story, or he could come to the point. And he was, I'm a Steve McQueen nerd and everything. And of course, David and Robert Wagner both, knew McQueen really well. But when David was doing The Man from U.N.C.L.E. at MGM, which is now Sony over in Culver City,
right?
He said he and Vaughn would, they wanted to get done because they wanted to live their lives, but they had the shooting schedule, and the executives on the lot would, they would come and sniff around, and they wanted, so what David said, he and Vaughn would they would put a PA outside the door, and they would just, because they would wrap it like, they'd get there at 8 a.m. and they were wrapped by 11:30 in the morning. It would just be like, they would shoot everything in one direction, and everyone was smart with their blocking and turned to the camera, and then they just popped in tighter, and they would ramble off 8 pages or 10 pages, and then they were done. Because everyone was a pro and everyone knew what they were doing, and they wanted to like go live a life and go to Malibu, and it was the 60s, for God's sakes. So they put a guy outside the studio stage door, and they just turned the red light on. So if anyone was trying to come on the stage, they'd be like, sorry, it is
can't
a
get in.
closed set.
Sorry,
can't get in.
No.
And there was that totally empty stage, which I love so much.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's amazing. If that's true, I mean, that's to
It was
saw
a different
through.
time.
Yeah. And also, I mean, sure. I mean, you could probably do that then, where you could lock off one way for an hour and then turn it around, and then nobody would be the wiser. So
I mean, David loved blocking like nobody. He would come in and be like, "Now, Gary, you will stand here."
Right.
You're like, okay.
Well, there's numerous times when David comes in, with the script. I will say this. I will not say this.
Yes. We've all gone through it, and we loved him for it. I mean,
right.
And
I would
at that point,
personally
you
say
weren't
this.
gonna, you were not gonna argue with that guy.
No.
You're like, yeah, he's earned it.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear the story about the Band-Aid? David, in season 1, there was an explosion at a crime scene. We were all outside of this house, and the house blew up. And David, on the day when all the splinters flew and he saw what Larry Fuentes did with the explosion, he was like, he went over to makeup and he put a little blood on his forehead. So for the reaction shot when he lifted his head, and so the audience, elicit audience sympathy. It's 101 TV star in the manual they give you at SAG.
I've been damaged. Yes.
And so down in autopsy, to keep continuity, he put a Band-Aid on his head, and Harmon hated this so much. Harmon was just apoplectic about the whole like scene sealing of it and the whole eliciting whatever it was. Harmon, it got under his skin. Not hard to do. Sort of an expert. But Harmon.
Did you know that? Did you know that, by the way, Gary? That he was an expert?
Well, I've heard,
There's stories. There's stories.
You've heard Weatherly stories, but
Harmon, through Sean. Sean, to me, is my show historian.
Oh, Sean has very slowly let them.
Sean is my show historian in a very, very diplomatic way, but he lets me know.
The way that Mark would deal sometimes with a little bit of irritation is he would get a little prankster that would come out in him. So he handed out Band-Aids to all of us. and we all put Band-Aids on our heads, and we all walked into autopsy wearing Band-Aids on our heads, and we shot the scene or rehearsed it or whatever, but it was the first take, and Billy Webb had the Steadicam on, and everyone on the crew was laughing. David McCallum did not blink.
Did you all strategically put it in the exact same place that David had it?
Yeah. And he did. David he's locked in. And he's like, it's somewhat inappropriate that all of you are wearing the thing I do.
Right.
But you're stealing my, and then we all took it off and had a laugh.
Gary, how long have you been doing the show?
I came in, we're now going into season 22. I came in at the beginning of season 19.
Oh my gosh.
So this would be, because of the strike, it was a little short, but 4 years, basically. This would be
4 years.
Season,
and how did you find out that you were going to be Was it just like a phone call? We often talk about, hey, how was it when you got the part kind of a thing? Did you know anything about the show? Did you have to do any research on the show? Had you ever seen the show?
I had seen the show, a couple of decades before. I didn't really watch the show.
Age us.
Well, a while ago.
Decades ago.
Well, yeah, wasn't Bill Clinton president when this show went on the air? Not quite.
Cody was in diapers.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's
no. I found out about it very late. Apparently, it's weird because they didn't. Mark, I guess, wanted to leave, and when that was, discussed or came up, and I don't know when it actually came up because it came up somewhere between season 18 and 19. They weren't sure what they were going to do. There was talk that they would just end it. From what I heard is that he, I don't know why he would be surprised by that because it could have been a possibility. But then he agreed to begin the 19th year and do 4 shows while they brought in this other character and I think the way they did it was smart because rather than him leaving and then one day, there's a knock on the door and, hi, I'm the new guy. We did shows together involved in the same case. He worked for the FBI and they were working in tandem and they had conflict and all blah, blah, blah.
And you were one of the few people that got to go to Alaska, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Which was an amazing experience. I remember talking to Mark about that, and
it was really something.
Michael, I'm sure knows this, but I've always been terrified of bears. I don't know why, but I've always been terrified of bears, and I guess he had like a very close encounter with a bear. Mark, not while you guys were shooting.
You mean what? Because he had been there previously, right?
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And I remember him telling me this, and I was like, oh my God, like I just freaked out. But he was just telling how beautiful it was. And I just remember a couple of scenes, especially one in that particular episode, which was, I think, Gibbs's last episode of McGee and Gibbs. And it was a really beautiful scene.
I love you, man.
I love you too.
That was gorgeous. It was set up really nicely. They had him in there.
Scene.
Yeah, they had, the hip waders and they were, and there's a great shot as once they have their final scene, they just leave Mark in the water and then you see the seaplane going behind him. They got
it
very
was a
lucky.
small crew, right? Very small crew.
Yeah, I mean, it was not everybody went. We had, probably half of the people that really worked on the show, maybe more than that. But it was a skeleton crew compared to what we have back here. But they were also real lucky because they told us we stayed in a big fishing lodge that normally closes down on Labor Day for the winter. They seal it up and everybody goes away. But they kept it open for an extra 10 days. We only shot, I think it was 3 days. But we had to get there. They had to scout quickly, shoot, and then wrap up and leave. But they were lucky because they normally said at that time of year, it's basically just kind of foggy and damp and all of this beautiful landscape. You don't really see it. You might get, it might burn off for like an hour. But those 3 days were like crystal clear, sunshine.
The film gods were on your side.
Yeah,
totally.
They really lucked out because they were able to really use everything.
Godly send-off.
Yeah, it was a really good, a good TV exit. It was well done.
I wanted to ask you because I can go in my Wayback Machine to doing an episode with Sean Murray. I think Mark may have been having a shoulder surgery or something. He couldn't really work for a period of time. And so they had Sean and I doing sort of pulling the sled, the what would have been the Gibbs sled, that captain's seat. And we were kind of co-running. I think there was some auction house that I remember, and we had to arrest people in the parking lot. And when they cut the episode together, Mark Horowitz and Shills and everybody, and I can't remember if it was Shane or I think it was after Don left, though. They said it doesn't work without Mark because, you know, the way that cast, I mean, it's like the Brady Bunch, right? You got to have, like, every character serves a kind of archetypal purpose.
Right.
And without that lead dog, it kind of got a little like wiggly waggly. And by the time you got to the fourth act, it sort of didn't have that vertebrae, that spine to bring you through the story. So they actually reshot scenes and brought Mark back in when he was healed. And that really stood out to me when I thought, wow, doing this show without Harmon looks like it might be impossible. It's so interesting to me when I see you in the chair and sweep into the room, and the way that you have chosen to command that room is very backseat, it feels to me.
Happy to hook you up with a guy there I know. He can probably give you some more intel on your petty officer.
You know, it'd be faster if you made the call.
I'd love to, but I'm already going to miss half the warm-up act. So,
like, the authority is strong, but it's quiet. And Mark was a functional mute, Gibbs. So he was not, he didn't talk a lot, but everyone was afraid of him. He ruled sort of by fear. I love how your character began, and I wanted to ask you about the boy who played the guy who played your son, your younger version of yourself.
Right.
You had a brush with crime,
right?
Your character,
right,
Parker, and it seems to me like Gibbs was never a criminal. He was engaged in revenge and a sort of Charles Bronson, Clint Eastwood, revenge fantasy thing.
Yeah.
But that's not where your character comes from, a kind of grayer area. And I wondered if that was when you were prepping to create him, or if you knew any of this stuff, or what that was like.
Or did you sit down with the writers and they pitch things to you?
No, I mean, I really let, things just kind of unfold in front of me. They told me the idea of how they wanted to introduce him working side by side with the team, including Mark, working on this case that they all had in common. And then after that, I just kind of reacted to what they started to give me, which was, and they were conscious that they didn't want the same dynamic at all, because they didn't really want to try to force something to be the same as it was with another character. And I think the observations you just made is that's the same thing I made. Horowitz said something which made sense, I guess, in a broad way, which is that if Mark was the stern father that everybody was afraid of and or trying to please, this guy was the crazy uncle, or just the the whoever that, even though he's got the title of leader of the team, he's only using the authority when it's necessary, or just for coordination. Otherwise, he's just another guy in the room, trying to relate to, everybody that's around him. And that's how I went at it. And it's like, and you guys, you lived it and for years and made the show into what it is because of just the interactions of the characters. The case is the case. The case is always going to be there. Mm-hmm. But the reason I think people watch it is because of the intimacy or the dynamics in between characters, however they evolve, and they've got this, this task that they're trying to accomplish in the background. And that's how I really look at it. And I try to go literally scene by scene, show by show. We do a scene. Does this scene work? Get it right and move on to the next one. And, it's up to the higher hire gods up in the upstairs third floor to put it all together and make it work. But I think that's right.
Are you having fun after 4 years?
The thing I always liked about being in this environment as an actor is when you're an ongoing character that literally is going by in years. You know, I'm four. You know, we're all a year older every time we go back for the season. There's weight to that. There's and I always felt I had to invent less as an actor and you just start to behave because you don't really think of what you need to do. It just, you know, if it's written as it should be, you know, if it's tight and it's clear, you will just behave as the character. You know, there's times you gotta make certain scenes work, and there might be a blip in there writing wise that's fixable, and that's what we try to do. That's one thing I learned doing Veep. I saw Julia Dreyfus constantly, and not if it wasn't necessary, but if just one moment wasn't, you know, something was missing, you know, something was misfiring in a scene that was actually doing well, but it just kind of, you know, after a minute or so, it hits a wall, and then you stop and fix it somehow.
I love that you're saying this because we've talked about this a lot with Michael and certainly other actors that have gone through NCIS and either worked with us or then subsequently worked later, is the idea that you always go back to the dialogue, you always go back to the storyline, and you always go back to things that, you know, if they need to be fixed, you fix. You know, you don't glaze over them. You don't just go out, right, or whatever. They can fix it on editing. You know what I mean?
I can remember being on a crime scene set. And it was I was the only agent on the scene. There were a lot of ND sort of background actor agents, but I was alone, and I was on the phone back to Autopsy or Abby's Lab or whatever it was, and I was relating what I was seeing, but there was no intercut with it was just a voice, so I had to carry the whole thing, and I couldn't lean on that, you know, so I had to get it all right. And I didn't understand the scene. It had something to do with like, well, if he was left-handed, he could never have done the blah, 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 or whatever the thing. And I didn't understand my point of view. And it felt like I was just jabbering information, and that my character was not present. That like, why not just have one of these ND agents say this and give him a day rate, because I have no reason to be here, do that. And so I went over to the writer who was on set, and I can't remember who I tortured. But I said, can you run this with me? So we ran it. And then I said, what does that mean? When I say that? And then they were like, oh, well, you know, da, 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 da. And I was like, let's do it again. So then we ran it again. I'm like, let's go again right away, twice as fast. And then we ran it again. And as I ran it with the writer, he heard the mistake. And then he went, oh, because you wouldn't know. Okay, now I know what it is. And then he switched up the lines. But I have to say, I didn't know the mistake. I couldn't spot it. It took a kind of writer brain to figure it out.
Yeah. But you just knew it just wasn't rolling off your tongue.
But you felt it. You knew that the scene wasn't getting through. It wasn't.
And then all of a sudden it had a point of view, and all of a sudden it locked in, and it was really fun, and it sailed. And to me, that was one of the great joys. And so I was curious for you, is a role like Veep, or a job like Veep, not a role, but like set environment?
No, I mean, Veep was extraordinary, and one of the different things about Veep was I had never been on a television show and I don't even remember how the schedule went. I mean, it was a half-hour show, it was a single camera show, so we kind of had a sitcom schedule, you know, like we do 3, take a week off. But then there were times when there were just rehearsals for like a solid 4 or 5 days before a camera before you'd even see a camera.
Wow.
And, and just like, here's the draft. Everybody reads the first draft. And then what are we going to do now? Well, we're going to throw that in the corner, and everybody's going to get up. This is after we just read it. Nobody has memorized anything or anything like that. And now we're just going to do the scene that we just read, but without benefit of this script, and just everyone's just going to throw their dialogue in the internet. And versions of that, and they'd come back and look at that and then take lines that came up in the rehearsal and do that. So that was a show that was constantly kind of being written while we were shooting it. There was always 3 writers at the monitor.
Was there a lot of corpsing and a lot of like people just not being able to keep their shit together, or was everyone? Because I can only imagine that got especially with ad-libbing or
sure.
at least a structured ad-libbing. I mean, you were the vice president on West Wing and then Veep, so you know a lot about vice presidencies. Right? That's sort of your.
I'm an expert.
That's his wheelhouse. That's the wheelhouse.
What was your point? This is Cody knows. This is like one of my favorite things is point of entry. Cody came from a background where you studied stage and you studied the text and you studied and I did a Snickers commercial, so I clearly have a lot of training, but everyone's point of entry is so interesting to me. And when I saw 1985 man running away from police to live in LA, but what was curious to me is I was thinking, so you're in Chicago, you're up to your ears in a prestigious, esteemed theatrical world, right? And you're was there a moment of I'm going to give this a try, or somebody solicited and said, Gary, come to LA or come to, an audition, or like, how did camera work?
That's a really good question. Point of entry or the break.
Yeah, I had a very, well, I don't know. There's nothing, nobody has a traditional or non-traditional. I mean, it's just to go into business is, whatever.
Everyone lands on the moon totally differently.
But I didn't, like the first time I went to New York, it wasn't like, all right, I'm going to New York. I went to New York in a play that had been sent there from Chicago. So
which one?
True West.
Oh, yes.
Sam Shepard play. So the first time I ever went to New York, I got off the plane and went to rehearsal. So that was that's a big difference.
By the way, that's a luxury for any actor to get off the plane in New York and have a job.
No kidding. Yeah.
I mean, that in itself is like huge because most people just go and they're like, I don't know.
Exactly.
I'm going to go see.
And basically the same thing with Los Angeles. I wound up in a mini-series back when mini-series were a network thing called Fatal Vision, which was a 4-hour mini-series about it was a true crime thing. And I don't know that would even happen today, because one of the reasons that I got cast was that they had offered it to a bunch of people, I don't know, known or unknown, but no, they got a lot of rejections, and they were getting closer to shooting, and it was really a question of, being, wherever you are on the list, and it just happened to shake. And that was my first experience in Los Angeles. So that was another situation where it was like 8 weeks on this thing where I basically was in basically everything that was shot. And To Live and Die in L.A. came right on the heels of that. And that only happened because Billy Peterson was a real good friend of mine. We were together in Chicago all the time. We were roommates. And he got cast in this thing. And and Billy being the social networker that he is, had, 4 of his friends well, why don't you use this guy? He's good.
So wait 1 second. Can I ask you a question? Because this is really funny, because now you're saying a lot of names that I actually know. Do you know Stephen Ike?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Because he's one of my dearest friends.
Oh, yeah. No,
so I've hung out with, the entire crew.
Steve basically was the executive director of Steppenwolf through the 80s and into the 90s, I think, if I got my chronology right. No, it was It was wonderful. In Chicago, between, 1980 and the end, even up until, the 90s, even though I had spent time out here, I was still back and forth, and so were a lot of people. Still returning to the theater, and it was
what a time, right? I mean,
yeah, it was very
Malkovich, Metcalf.
Sure.
Yeah, Gary Sinise.
Yeah, I mean, it was really
Billy
collaborative.
Peterson. It was just a really good group of terrific, talented actors.
Yeah,
doing truly remarkable things.
It reminds me too of Julia Louis-Dreyfus and her comedy background, where it's like a similar cadre of adventurers, and she was a Saturday Night Live regular. And she had, and the sort of trial by fire that everyone goes through coming out of those places. And it's always interesting to me because I did a soap opera in New York for 3 years. And I feel like that was my angle of entry in a way. I did a play while I was doing the soap, and I had a band. So for 3 years,
you were busy.
I had to stop drinking because after...
Oh, you didn't have time for that?
I didn't have time. You know what I mean? Because, and I think we all know, that feeling. If someone offers you a job, you say yes. I didn't even hear them ask if I could ride the horse. And then I get upset. I'm like, oh. And
well, you should never answer that,
That's right.
Well, no, I mean, that's the first thing they told you when you graduated from school. It was like,
of course.
Can you do this? Of course. Of course.
Oh,
I can do it. And then you have like a month to kind of like become okay at it. And
Right.
then show up and
I grew up on a ranch. I've been roping cattle since I was 5. No problem. Show me this.
Oh my God.
What I learned from the soap opera was, and I was working with people like Celeste Holm, who, and Wesley Addy, her husband, they lived on Central Park. They liked this job because they could walk to work. They, and the hours were manageable for them, and they only worked a few days a week. And, but she had her Academy Award in her dressing room, just to remind everybody. And then you had young 20-year-olds like me coming in who didn't know their ass from their elbow and bumping into lights and cameras. And I remember this one guy named Bernie Barrow turned to me and he goes, when you feel confused, you look confused. And he goes, you got to learn to hide that. And I said, it's just, there's so many people in the scenes and I never know whose line it is. I know it's just so hard. And he said, I'm going to tell you something. This is going to get you pretty far down the road in television and film. And I said, what's that? And he goes, watch the boom. Because if the boom is over your head, it's your line.
Oh my God, that is true.
Yeah.
However, imagine if we were always watching the boom, it'd be this kind of scene all the time.
Well, you do get this peripheral sense, and those booms were on like cranes back. The boom guy stood up on a platform and moved the boom through.
Oh my God! I mean, watching the evolution of the equipment. When I started doing this, there certainly was no video village. There may have been at one point a monitor, which literally was about this big.
It's funny because when we were talking about this, about, these sweet sort of like stories about starting and the beginning of the beginning kind of, which we do a lot. Do you ever go back to a time that you go, oh man, that was such a sweet, sweet time? When you go back about like maybe your time in the theater, is there a particular time, Gary, that you think about like, man, that was a really good time and I didn't know it? It happens to me often that I'm hit with these like moments that I go, man, I had no idea that was such a great moment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I single out one moment, but I just feel, and Chicago for me was, my creative beginning began in that city, which is my hometown anyway.
Sure.
And it was at that time in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, it was so affordable. And there really wasn't, unless you chose to go one way or the other, there was a ceiling on, the business. I mean, it was basically theater except for the occasional movie that ran through town or whatever. But what I do remember is of a time when you're that age, when you're trying to make something happen for yourself, and you're working with others, and it's communal. And what I do remember, and what I compare it to now, is that when you're in that pocket, in your early 20s, early mid 20s, and you're learning and trying to learn how to be good, and how to get better, and how to work with somebody and throw the ball back and forth. I just remember the amount of close relationships I had. I mean, just the number. It's like you were a tribe. That's one of the nice things about being there, is the fact that, and you guys were the, kind of the beginning of it. So it may have felt, differently because you were laying a foundation. But for now, what's going on there, and I'm talking primarily not just us in the cast, but the crew itself, it's extraordinary to me. I mean, there's people there that some of them were on JAG, some of them worked on JAG. So you're talking about, being on the same lot for 25 years.
Oh, yeah.
Johnny O and Billy Bake. But some of those background people in the squad room have been there since the beginning.
Right.
Since the
when
beginning.
I walked into the squad room and shook your hand, Gary, I looked around and I was saying hello to all these people that I had walked around with for 13 years.
Right.
I walked around that room with them.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I hadn't seen them in 8 years, and here they were. Well, we are going to let you drift gently back into your day, Gary. Thank you. And I know that it was a weirdo kind of like, what am I doing? You want me to go do what? But
with these people I've never met. Wait, what?
For you to accept this invitation and come hang out with us and talk about NCIS, but more importantly, exploring your incredible career. I mean, it's so cool to get to spend this time with you and hear the stories, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Well, thanks for having me.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I just, as I walk through the halls, with orange walls, I realized that there was a lot of sweat and effort that went into keeping the lights on that are still on in that place. And, that's kind of a tip of the cap to both of you and everybody else that's come before. And so that's why one reason I wanted to be here was, and also to spend some time and meet you guys, because Michael, like I said, met briefly in Cote. It was great to see you and meet you.
Yeah.
And so thanks for having me. I really appreciated being here.
We got to hang out with Gary Cole.
Yeah, he's so sweet.
That was really I had no idea what to expect, but that was really something. I mean, I didn't know that you had that connection through your friend Steven too. So
it dawned on me as he starts talking about this, and then Billy Peterson, and I was like, wait a minute. Because, the Steppenwolf has been around for a long time, and lots of different actors and different, groups of people have gone through there. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, but if he knows Peterson, then he has to know Steven. And so that was a fun one.
Because how long?
4 years.
How many more seasons do you think they're going to do the Mothership? It's kind of interesting.
God, you never know. They may go for, another 10. You never know. I don't know.
We were talking the other day that the only one that's left that's a spinoff is NCIS Sydney.
Well, and also when you start going back from the original cast, who's there from I think it's Sean Murray, Brian Dietzen, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, but obviously it runs and it does great. So it's, as long as they keep making it, I think they'll have, they'll have a following.
Okay, it's time for game time. Game time. Remember. Now, this one is called Remember. In this NCIS episode, Gibbs wakes up unable to remember anything from the past 15 years. Conversely, can Cote and Michael remember anything from the past 24 podcast episodes?
Oh, God, I can remember a lot. I think this is going to turn into a two-parter.
Okay. All right. We're both going to, okay. What was the name of Rudolph Martin's little dog, don't say it, that he brought on the set of NCIS?
And this is my little dog named Comet.
Comet. Yeah, you got it. Okay,
Of
good.
course.
You got that one right. When you acted out a silly scene with Eric Olson, which strange accent did he adopt?
Oh, God, that's a good one. Norwegian?
Swedish?
Oh, Gollum. Okay, God, we were so
We did
far
not
off.
get it. It's
not even funny.
Gollum. The answer is Gollum. I did not get that.
Okay. Who is Sean Murray's favorite serial killer?
That's so funny that I don't remember, but I'm going to say Ted Bundy. What are you going to say?
I hated this. I hated this game.
You don't like serial killers.
No,
Okay,
it's just that
drum
I
roll.
just,
Who do you think it is, Cody?
I don't know. I don't remember. I think I blocked it out. I blacked out.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, you're going to have to go with a Jeffrey
The
Dahmer.
answer was Jeffrey Dahmer. Okay,
Yep.
well, we're not doing well. What was David McCallum's implied early advice to Brian Dietzen? Oh, I do remember this.
Oh, tell me, which one?
Steal the scene.
Oh, steal the scene.
Right?
Huh.
Is that right? Be a scene stealer. Is that correct? Oh, don't ask for a series
okay.
regular contract. Oh,
Which, by the way, he
that's-
got, but he got that much later. I mean, he had to put in a lot of time.
and the reason that David McCallum said don't ask for a series regular contract is that the guy before Brian had asked for a series regular contract and they fired him. So
Right, so I think he was afraid for a long time. What
Yeah.
line did Daniela Rua say when she showcased her gun face?
freeze
I don't
federal
remember.
agents
Oh, yes, because Eric had
down on
like
the
a
ground,
yeah.
hands up. Down on the ground, hands up.
That's awesome.
Well, once again, we have failed miserably in our game time. Remember, which we've now retitled Forget.
So let's go into fan questions, Cherie. This is coming from Miles, San Jose, California. PinPin Pula squad assemble, a.k.a. Pula poops. What? Michael and Cote, what are your favorite seasons of NCIS?
Well, I did say this a little bit earlier. Season 3,
Yeah.
6 and 7.
I have to go through them again and start watching them, which I hope we get to do. But I have a special place in my heart for 3, and then I'll have to revisit all the other ones because I haven't watched them in a long time. I remember 3 being very special for many reasons, and so that makes this season of this podcast very special because we revisited a very special time. Jenna from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Wow.
I've been there.
I'm already halfway into season 4. NCIS is so good. Thanks, Jenna. From rewatching all of season 3, is there anything you two should have been, do you think anything should have been done differently in retrospect? That's a good question. What do you think?
Nope. Wouldn't change a thing. No regrets. Can't live that way. Don't look back.
All right. I'll right in line with you, Daddy. Glenn, Savannah. Out of all the
Savannah,
guests
Georgia.
you've had, Georgia, out of all the guests you've had on the podcast, which 3 would you have on your team in a zombie apocalypse? Oh my gosh.
Good question. Okay. I'm going to say you're going to want Eric Christian Olsen.
He's
one.
fun.
He's fun, but he can also like start fire with his hands, and he looks like somebody who knows about camping.
Oh yeah. No, that's true.
He's young and strong.
He's
I'm
young
gonna-
and strong. That's good.
Because there's going to be no satellites in the zombie apocalypse. So you're not going to need a probie. I love you, Sean Murray, but we're going to know the computers are going to be down.
No
We need-
computer. You're actually
We
going
need
to
to
need like
fight the zombies with axes and with bow and arrow and whatever we can.
You
make
know
in
who
the
may be
forest.
good because he's in terrific physical shape? Brian Dietzen. He's a runner. That guy. He's an he's outdoors a lot of the time. He's from Colorado.
Yes, and he's thin, so he won't eat as much.
He won't eat your rations.
And then,
What are you like? What are you?
I mean,
Oh my god.
I hate to say it. I mean, do we want to look good? Should we have Rachel Good on the zombie
Rachel
apocalypse?
Good in the hood. One last time in this season, it's time for Gibbs' Rule of the Day. It'll be a while until the next one, so let's hope this one's good. Gibbs' Rule of the Day, rule number 8, Cherie.
And number 8 is my lucky number,
Yes, it is, because you were born July 8th.
1968.
There you go.
Rule number 8, never take anything for granted? And
Have you ever, like, before you go there, have you ever taken anything for granted?
Good question. And I'm sure I have. Can I tell you something I'm not taking for granted? This podcast. This is the end of our time in this season of, if we come back and do another round, would you come back and do more of these?
Yes, I think so. I think it's been so much fun. It's just kind of reminiscing about life with you. Remember, the idea first came about because you and I started having these really kind of very long conversations during the pandemic.
And long to me, that's just a short chat. 2-3 hours. I'm just getting started.
2-3 hours. It's like, and then then at one point I remember thinking like, wow, if we could just kind of like take just an hour of these and just put them out there. Some of them were quite interesting. And of course, we've had to use the structure of the show, which we're both fans of and we both love. And it's the reason why we know each other. So it's actually a great idea to give the show that structure, and then we can sort of riff on that, But the idea, it's funny because now I look forward to the Gibbs rule, because the Gibbs rule sends it like opens the door to some philosophical thing. It always does, because it opens the door into the, hey, Michael, what have you taken for granted? And then we go into these very personal things, which is the thing that I really love.
And I can say, looking back over these 25 episodes, that I do not have a favorite one, because I see it as a whole, like as a piece. And each conversation, each investigation of an episode, I talk about gratitude, like just the fact that I got employed as an actor is a marvel to begin with. But to work with all of these people in the season 3 canon, but also all the wonderful people like Mark Horowitz and Dennis Smith and the people behind the scenes that Rachel Good, people that maybe the people at home don't get to really investigate, or somebody like Gary Cole, who neither of us ever worked with, but there he is carrying the NCIS banner proudly, strongly, beautifully, and moving forward into the future. And it's a talk about gratitude, so Gibbs rule number 8 is a great one to have for this.
Never take anything for granted. Rule number 8. And by the way, 8 is a special number for me too. I love that number. And from here, where do we go?
We go off into the sweet, beautiful future, into whatever podcast void we go into. But
but also we're about to experience Budapest.
We're going
and Europe, and we're going to go do a little bit more of these characters, and that's going to be super fun.
We're going to bring to the people the adventures of Tony and Ziva. And if you want to watch it, you can go to Paramount Plus. But if you want to watch episodes of NCIS, NCIS LA, NCIS New Orleans, NCIS Hawaii, or NCIS Sydney, you can go to Paramount Plus, or you can watch new episodes of NCIS on CBS.
You're so good. Thank you for being here.
I love you, Cote de Pablo.
Shut up. I love you too.
Remember when you were dating somebody and you wouldn't hang up the phone? And it was like, no, you hang up. No, you hang up.
Oh, no, that's so nice.
That's kind of how I feel right now. No, you hang up. No, you hang up.
Oh, no, you hang up.
No, you hang up.
Okay.
Oh, okay. No,
I have to do it against my will. No.
Okay.
No, don't do it.
All right. Well, we'll send it back to the audience. I'm Michael Weatherly.
And I'm Cote de Pablo.
This has been Off Duty, an NCIS rewatch.